it's so cool to get to talk to you. We started our little dog and pony show of a podcast in 2020 when every other podcast started. And I learned over the years that if you continued building the podcast, people would reach out to be hosted on the show. And so at first it was really cool because I'd get an email from a PR person and say, hey, do you want to host this person? I'd be like, wow, cool. Yeah, of course you want to be on the show. And we'd end up like drifting into topics that I had no business like talking about or whatever. So now I get like 10 of those a day. I delete all of them usually after I vetted the person and whatever. It's a few months ago. I check my email. I see one and it says, hey, Dr. Georgia Ede is an author. I got about that far into the email. I smashed reply with the boldest text I could find in bright red. I said, yes. Underneath that, yes, 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 yes. Schedule her yesterday. I'll fire my clients. I don't care. Get her on. That's amazing. The guy replied the next day. He was like, wow, it was pretty enthusiastic reply. I replied to him back and said, dude, if I could make fireworks shoot out of your computer and have like elephants parade in your living room, I would do that. Like, it would be terribly destructive, but like, I'm very excited.
I am clearly not paying you enough.
I really did reply that to him and I haven't heard
a
back.
raise.
Well,
That's
I was telling
very,
you,
very, very nice of you. Thank you.
well, it's very true. You're somebody that I followed for a very long time. In 2018, I was kind of getting into this space. I'd been a trainer for a decade, and I had read Nina's book earlier than that, and I knew fat was okay. But I was learning. We did this weight loss contest at our gym that we were working at. It was terribly ineffective. The compliance rate was very, very low, and it sucked, and we hated it. And we had to do it every quarter. And we had some guy who did a ketogenic diet, and he won. He signed up with us, so we got honored for doing that. And we're like, wow, what's this? And I remember learning about this stuff and going to certain podcasts like Peak Human, which Brian Sanders did, was the way that I got introduced to you guys way back then. And like thinking that not only could meat be super healthy, but also that plants can cause harm was such a novel idea to me at the time. And that wasn't even new for you. You'd known that for a really long time.
Well, I didn't know it myself until, I don't know, maybe 2009 or 2010 when I started to study nutrition independently. And I was genuinely, like you, shocked, about the real science behind nutrition is, the information that's actually available if you dig into the science, into the studies. It's actually there for anybody to discover if they are curious enough, but it's not at all, of course, what we hear. We hear something very different, and I think that's why every person who stumbles onto it is so surprised.
Yeah, definitely. Stumbles is a great kind of word for how you found the diet. And it wasn't even really related to mental health, which is kind of ironic because that's what you were trained to do anyway. Can you tell us that story of how you kind of stumbled onto this way of eating?
Yeah, it really was stumbling onto it. And, like you said, I wasn't setting out to try to improve my mental health. I didn't have any major issues with my mental health. I had things, like winter depression. I'd get anxious on Sunday nights before I would go to work the next day. That was all pretty common. And I'd stress with work and things like that. And, things that I think a lot of people think of as normal. And I thought of those things as normal. But I was really trying to fix my physical health because I was in my early 40s at the time, and this was, oh my gosh, maybe 15 years ago, almost 20. And what ended up happening was I was coming down with all of these issues that I'd never had before, that a lot of my patients were dealing with, things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and IBS and migraines, and it was starting to interfere with my ability to function. And so I was working at Harvard University Health Service at the time. And I went to all these very smart and caring Harvard specialists and had all kinds of tests, and everything I was told was perfectly normal and there wasn't anything wrong. But of course, there must have been something wrong. And I left each doctor's office with the same generic printout about what to eat. Nobody asked me, what I was eating. So really what I ended up doing, like you said, I stumbled into this diet because I did some trial and error experiments with food to find out, to see if I could help myself feel better in some way. I thought, well, at least maybe the IBS might be food related. So that's really what I was targeting. And I just, kept a food and symptom journal for about 6 months and made changes. And by the end of that 6 months, everything had improved. I was feeling really well, better than I ever had before. but not just physically. I mean, all of those symptoms went away, but my mental health was better. It was noticeably better. And, my concentration was better, my mental stamina, my sleep was better, my energy was better, my mood was better. And I just kind of dealt with things more easily, things where I just felt, kind of more even and more positive. And I thought, this diet seems to be good for the brain. And the diet that I ended up with was a mostly meat diet. So I thought it was going to kill me in the end. And I certainly didn't rush out and start prescribing it for my patients because I really was concerned about, it was high in animal protein, it was high in animal fat, high in cholesterol, lower in fiber, lower in plant foods, significantly lower in plant foods and fiber. And I really was concerned about about the health of this diet. So that's why I decided to study nutrition, because I thought I need to understand whether or not this diet, which seems to have reversed every health problem I've ever had, and even some I didn't even realize I had, I need to understand whether this is a dangerous diet or whether I knew nothing about nutrition at that point. So yes, it was an accident.
Serendipity for sure. Very fortunate accident. So what was it like? I mean, you were at Harvard at the time. Is that correct? Do I have the timeline right? Or you were at Smith at the time?
That's correct. No, I wasn't at Smith until much later, but yes, I was at Harvard at the time. Mhm.
Okay, so not necessarily known to be the most progressive nutrition school on the planet, I would say. What was it like to get this information that again, maybe in the back of your mind, you were wondering whether the cholesterol was an issue and was going to cause other problems. But as you started to learn that this could actually be helpful for people's, mental health, how difficult was it to start to talk about some of this stuff?
Well, at first, it wasn't difficult at all. I mean, Harvard's a really big place, and I was not part of the nutrition department. In fact, the nutrition department was all the way on the other side of a completely different city. But and at first, there was a director at the health service where I was working, who was very open to me counseling students about nutrition, those who were interested. And in addition to the work that I was hired to do there, which was prescribe medications. And so I was allowed to say on my profile on the website of the University Health Service that I offered nutrition consultation. And so I was allowed to do some wonderful work there with students and faculty and staff as well, back when the service used to see faculty and staff. So, but then there was a leadership change, maybe about 5 years later. And the new director, who's no longer there, um, called me into her office and said, this is beyond the scope of psychiatric practice. And so we need you to stop immediately counseling students about nutrition. So the pushback actually came not from the nutrition department, but from the actual student health service.
I see.
And so that's one of the main reasons why I ultimately left Harvard and went to Smith. But I did, while I was at Harvard, I took a graduate course at the Harvard School of Public Health, the nutrition department, which was on the other side of town, over in Boston. I was in Cambridge. And they have a number of courses there on nutrition. I would have taken the second course, except the first course I found to be what's the right word? I found that I wasn't learning anything, or I was learning very little that I trusted in terms of the science behind some of the lectures. And so I did not invest in taking a second course at the Graduate School of Nutrition. So, but I did make an attempt to do that. And I thought, well, I feel like I could use my time better. I could learn more about nutrition if I studied it independently, unfortunately.